Hi, good morning. Welcome to yourstutor.com, and in today's session we'll talk about scope of variables in PHP. Well, scope is defined as the range of availability a variable has to the program in which it is declared. This means that from where you can access a variable from within a program would depend upon its scope. Now in PHP we have three scopes. First one is called local, the second is called global, and the third one is called static. Now to understand these scopes, let's take an example. First of all, we'll talk about the local variable scope. Let's create a function called display, and within the function let's declare a variable a and let's assign a value of 1 to this variable. And we all know that if we want to display the value of a on the screen, we can use echo statement in this fashion. And if we call this function display in this way, let's save this page and let's serve this page on the web server. If we refresh this, so we can say that value of a is being displayed over here, which is 1, and this was pretty much expected of this little program. But to understand local variables, how local variables work, let's just remove this line and let's use this echo statement not within the function but outside the function. Now please look at this clearly, that we have declared the variable a inside the display function, but we are trying to access the variable a outside the display function. Now this is not allowed in PHP. It is an illegal statement, since variable a would be available to the function if it is declared inside the function only, but we are trying to access the function, the variable a, from the outside of the function. So if we serve this page on the web server, we would see that it would generate an error on line number 10, and the error is undefined variable a. Now if we see, we are trying to access this variable a on the line number 10, and that's where the error is generated. So the variable a is only available to the function where it is declared, and it would not be available outside the function. So that is called local scope. So it is available locally to the function only where it is declared. So if I shift this echo statement and take this into this inside the function, and if I call this function, you would see that no error would be generated and the number 1 would be displayed on the screen, since this variable a is now available to the echo statement. Now to understand this in a better way, let's now declare this variable outside the function, and we are now accessing this variable a, which is declared outside the function. Within the function we are trying to access this variable a. So if we call this function in this fashion, again this would generate an error on line number 8. You can see here undefined variable a, because now this variable a is declared outside the function and this is not available to this function because variable a has a local scope. However, this variable a would be available to statements outside the function because the variable a is also outside the function. So if I use echo outside the function like this, you would see that 1 would be displayed over here and still the error remains here since we have not removed this line. So I'm sure local variable scope is pretty much clear to you. Let's now understand what is global variable scope. Now there are many times when you would need to access a variable which is declared outside a function in any function that you declare. So if you want to use this variable, let's say a, from within a function display, we need to use a keyword called global, and we need to declare this variable again in this fashion. Now once we declare this variable a again using the global keyword within the display function, we can now access this variable. Now just look clearly that we have redeclared the variable a using the global keyword, but we have not changed any value of this variable. So the value still remains a, and once we call this function display, so you would see that we would be able to access this variable a from within a function. So this is called global scope. By using this keyword global, we have changed the scope of the variable a to global. We can actually now manipulate this variable in any way we like. We can change the value. Let's change the value of a to 10, and once we refresh this, the 10 would be displayed over here. So that's how the global variables work. Now, so we've talked about local variables, we talked about global scope variables. Now let's talk about static variables. To understand what static variables are, let's create a function called increment. And let's again declare variable a. Let's assign a value of 1 to variable a. And within this function, we are actually incrementing the value of a by 1. So this plus sign would increment the value of a by 1. So now on the line number 8, we have assigned a value of 1 to a, but on line number 9, we have incremented by 1. So on line number 9, the a has a value of 2. And if you display this by using echo statement, let's call this function increment, and you would now see that value of a, which is now set to 2, would be displayed on the screen once we refresh it. So this is pretty simple. But if we again call this function, let's call this function multiple times. Let's call this function 3 times. So you would see once we refresh this page, 2 would be displayed 3 times, the number of times that we have called the increment function. This is happening because once a function ends, all the values and all the variables are discarded. So for the first time when this function was called, a was displayed, a was set to 1 at the first statement, then a was set to 1, then we had an increment, a is equal to 2, and we displayed 2 on the screen. Here the 2 was for the first time the function was run. When the second time the function was called, the value of the a was 2, but all the previous values were discarded, all the variables were discarded, and these 3 statements were run again. So again a was set to 1, increment 2, and then display 2. Third time also this thing again happened. But there would be some times in your programming logic when you would want to retain the value of a variable even if the function has ended or exited. You would want to store the value of a variable and persist. You would want that the value of a variable should persist even if the function has ended. So in that case, we can use static keyword while declaring a variable. Now once we use the static keyword here, let's refresh to see what would happen. So you would see now the value of a has actually incremented by 1, and the value has persisted even if the function has ended. So on the first run of increment, the value of a was set to 2. When the increment was called again, since we had used the static keyword, the value was still persisted. We had one increment statement, so 2 became 3. So a had the value of now 3. And when the increment function was called again for the third time, the value of a was persisted, and then an increment statement happened. So a became equal to 4. And that's how 2, 3 and 4 was printed on the screen. So if you want to persist the values of a particular variable in a given function, even if the function has exited or has ended, you can use the keyword static while declaring a particular variable. So this is called static variable. So in this session, we have talked about the scope of variables in PHP. We did talk about local variables, global variables, and static variables. This was a pretty basic session. In some advanced tutorials, you will learn more about how to use variables to achieve your programming logic. I hope you like it. Thank you so much, and see you soon.